Dr. Zuira Van Angst stood before the Galactic Scientific Council, her iridescent scales shifting from their usual calm blue to an agitated purple as she prepared to present her findings. The chamber's crystalline walls reflected the light from dozens of species gathered to hear her controversial research. After 300 years as the head cynobiologist for the council, she had never felt so uncertain about a presentation. Distinguished members of the council, she began, her voice steady despite her chromatic display. I stand before you today with evidence that challenges everything we understand about universal constants and species evolution. She gestured to the holographic display behind her, showing a scatter plot of survival statistics across all known sentient species. For the past 50 years, I have been studying an anomaly in our data. One species consistently defies our models for extinction events, natural selection, and basic probability itself. She highlighted a single line on the graph that shot upward, far beyond the clustering of other species' data points. That species is humanity. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Councillor Thexate, a being of pure energy contained within an environmental suit, pulsed with skepticism. Dr. Vanks, surely you're not suggesting that humans are somehow special. They're barely a Class 3 civilization. Not special, Counselor. Impossible. She pulled up footage from her research archives. Let me show you case study 47B. This is a human mining colony on Proxima B11, population 157. When their containment field failed, they should have been exposed to lethal levels of radiation. The footage showed the aftermath of the containment breach. Humans walking around, seemingly unaffected, some even laughing as they repaired the damage. Every predictive model showed a 99.99% chance of complete colony loss. Instead, at the exact moment of the breach, a previously unknown vein of radiation-absorbing minerals shifted upward through a geological fault that hadn't moved in millions of years. The timing was, by any scientific standard, impossible. She switched to another recording. Case Study 189C, a human transport ship, engines dead, caught in the gravity well of a gas giant. As they were about to be crushed by atmospheric pressure, a solar flare triggered a magnetic anomaly that not only provided them with enough power to restart their engines, but also slingshot them to safety. She paused, letting the implications sink in. The probability of these events occurring naturally is so low that our computers cannot express the number. The chamber erupted in discussions. A hive mind representative buzzed loudly. Perhaps they have developed technology we cannot detect. We considered that, Zyra replied. But these events occur even in pre-industrial human populations. During my research, I discovered historical records showing similar patterns throughout their entire history. They survive plagues that should wipe them out, emerge stronger from natural disasters, and consistently beat probability itself. She brought up a new dataset. But here's what truly concerns me. The effect appears to be getting stronger. As humanity spreads through the galaxy, the frequency and scale of these probability anomalies are increasing, and they're not limited to survival situations. The next hologram showed a human colony's agricultural output. This settlement experienced 3 years of drought. Every model predicted crop failure. Instead, they had record harvests. When we studied the soil composition, we found that the molecular structure of the Earth itself had somehow been altered to retain water more efficiently. The changes defied known physics. Counselor Thexate pulsed rapidly, their energy form flickering with agitation. What are you suggesting, Doctor? That humans can alter reality? Not consciously, no. But my research suggests they generate what I'm calling a probability field. The more humans are present, the stronger the field becomes. The more dire the situation, the more the field seems to bend reality to ensure their survival. She displayed a final graph. And the effect is exponential. A quantum mind representative spoke, their thoughts resonating directly in everyone's consciousness. This could explain the failure of the isolation initiative 20 years ago. Every attempt to contain human expansion resulted in inexplicable equipment failures, miscalculations, or convenient discoveries that allowed them to bypass our barriers. Precisely, Zyra confirmed. But there's more. The field appears to affect those who interact regularly with humans. Non-human colonies near human settlements show slightly elevated survival rates. It's as if their improbability field is contagious. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, the High Counselor, an ancient being from one of the galaxy's first spacefaring races, spoke. "What are your recommendations, Dr. Vanx?" Zayra's scales shifted to a deep gold, indicating intense focus. "We have three options. First, we could attempt to isolate humanity completely. But given the results of previous attempts and the strengthening of the field, I believe this would fail spectacularly. Second, we could try to study and possibly replicate the effect, though our current instruments can barely detect it, let alone measure it accurately. And the third option," the High Counselor prompted. "We accept that humanity represents something we don't yet understand. A cosmic wildcard that breaks our carefully constructed models of how the universe should work. Instead of fighting it, we learn to work with it. Because if my projections are correct, humanity's influence on galactic probability will only continue to grow." She showed one final simulation, demonstrating the projected spread of human probability fields over the next century. The visualization showed reality itself seeming to warp around human settlements, creating ripples of improbability that spread through space. "They're not just surviving anymore," she concluded. "They're thriving, and they're changing the fundamental rules of our universe simply by existing. The question isn't whether we should try to stop them. We can't. The question is, how do we adapt to a galaxy where probability itself bends around a single species?" As the council chamber erupted in heated debate, Zayra's scales settled into a pattern she'd never displayed before, a swirling mixture of fear and fascination. In all her years of research, she'd never encountered anything like humanity's effect on reality, and as she watched the council grapple with her findings, she couldn't help but wonder if this was just the beginning. In her private notes that evening, she added one final observation. "Perhaps the most remarkable thing about humans isn't that they bend probability. It's that they do so without even noticing. They consider their impossible luck to be normal. And maybe that's the most dangerous thing about them. They don't just survive the impossible. They expect to. And in expecting it, somehow, they make it happen." She closed her notes and looked out at the galaxy spinning beyond her window. Somewhere out there, countless humans were going about their lives, unknowingly warping the fabric of reality around them. And she had a feeling that this was just the first chapter in a much stranger story. The next morning, as if to prove her point, she discovered that her entire research database had somehow backed itself up to 17 different secure locations, just hours before a power surge would have destroyed her only copy. She looked at the backup logs and laughed. She hadn't authorized any backups. But then again, she had been studying humans for quite some time now. Perhaps their probability field had rubbed off on her after all. She made a note to add this incident to her research. Then she began preparing for her next presentation to the council. Someone had to help them understand that fighting human probability wasn't just futile. It was probably the most dangerous thing they could do. After all, if there's one thing more dangerous than a species that can bend reality, it's trying to stop them from doing it. The universe itself seemed to be on their side, and Zyra Vanx was beginning to suspect that this was no accident. The only question was, what would humanity do once they finally realized their power? But that was a problem for another day. Right now, she had a galaxy to convince that the impossible wasn't just possible, it was becoming the new normal. The Galactic Council's experimental research station Theta 9 hung in the void between stars, its crystalline structure reflecting the distant starlight. Inside the primary observation chamber, senior researcher Kexnal adjusted his gravitational stabilizers as he reviewed the latest data streams with growing frustration. Playtest Sequence 47. Alpha again, he commanded. The holographic display flickered to life, showing footage from their latest controlled experiment on the human colony of New Eden. The experiment had been simple in theory. They had introduced a highly aggressive but non-lethal bacterial strain into the colony's water supply. According to every predictive model, it should have caused widespread illness, forcing the colonists to request emergency medical aid. Instead, pause footage, Kexnell sighed, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Analyze water sample composition at time index 3.7. The A's response was immediate. Analysis shows complete absence of introduced bacterial strain. Further investigation reveals spontaneous evolution of beneficial probiotic organisms with similar genetic markers. Kexnell added another note to his already lengthy report. This marked the 12th failed attempt to study humanity's probability field under controlled conditions. Each time, reality itself seemed to reshape around their experiments in increasingly improbable ways. Director Vance was right, he muttered, reviewing the complete test logs. They don't just survive, they thrive. His assistant, Rylta, a bioluminescent being from the aquatic worlds of the cephalon cluster, pulsed with curious light patterns. Perhaps we should review Test Series Beta. The environmental stress scenarios. The holographic display shifted to show multiple scenarios they had engineered. In one, they had triggered a minor tectonic disturbance near a human mining operation. Instead of forcing an evacuation, the tremors had revealed a massive deposit of rare minerals. In another, they had created an artificial drought, only to watch as the humans developed new agricultural techniques that yielded 3 times the normal harvest. It's not just that they survive, Kexnell observed. It's that each crisis seems to make them stronger. Look at these adaptation rates. He highlighted a series of graphs. No other species shows this pattern. It's as if the universe itself is conspiring to help them evolve. A soft chime announced the arrival of Dr. Vance herself. The xenobiologist's scales shimmered with excited patterns as she reviewed their latest results. Fascinating, she said, her voice carrying that peculiar mix of scientific detachment and barely contained enthusiasm that had made her famous across the galaxy. Have you noticed the correlation between population density and probability field strength? Kexnell brought up the relevant data. Yes, but there's something else. Something we didn't expect. He highlighted a particular dataset. The field effect appears to be learning. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Vanx's scales shifted to a deep purple of intense concentration. Explain. Each time we introduce a new type of challenge, the probability field's response becomes more efficient. Look at Test Series Gamma. He displayed footage from multiple experiments. The first time we introduced an environmental hazard, the field generated a random beneficial mutation. The second time, the solution appeared faster. By the third attempt, the threat was neutralized before it fully manifested. Dr. Vanx finished, her scales now pulsing with excitement. The field isn't just reactive, it's adaptive. Rylta's bioluminescence flickered rapidly. Could this explain why traditional containment methods have failed? The more we try to restrict human expansion, the more the field learns to overcome our efforts. Kexnell confirmed. But there's more. We've detected trace probability distortions around non-human species who frequently interact with humans. It's as if prolonged exposure to their field begins to generate a similar effect in other beings. Dr. Vanx moved closer to the holographic display, her scales shifting through patterns that indicated deep thought. Show me the cross-species contamination data. The display filled with new information. Charts showing subtle but undeniable changes in probability patterns around alien species living near human settlements. Ships with mixed human-alien crews survived situations that should have been fatal. Non-human colonies near human settlements experienced unexplainable strokes of good fortune. It's not just contamination, Dr. Vanix said slowly, her scales settling into a pattern that none of them had seen before. It's transformation. They're changing the fundamental rules of reality for everyone around them. Kexnell felt a familiar sensation of vertigo that had nothing to do with his gravitational stabilizers. Should we be concerned? Concerned? My dear colleague, we should be terrified. Dr. Vanx's scales shifted to a bright, almost luminous pattern, but not for the reasons you might think. We're not witnessing a threat to galactic stability. We're watching the next stage of universal evolution unfold before our eyes. She gestured to the massive dataset they had compiled. Every attempt to study, contain, or control this phenomenon has not only failed, but has somehow contributed to its growth. The more we try to understand it, the more it expands beyond our comprehension. A new alert flashed across their screens. Another experiment had just produced unexpected results. A simulated cosmic ray burst that should have disrupted communications had somehow created a new type of quantum entanglement, accidentally advancing human communication technology by several decades. End all active experiments, Dr. Vanx commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. We're done testing them. But our research, Kexnell began. Our research is testing the patience of forces we barely understand, she interrupted. Each experiment isn't just failing. It's teaching their probability field new ways to bend reality. We're essentially training it to be stronger, more adaptive, more efficient. She turned to face her colleagues, her scales now displaying a pattern that combined academic excitement with a healthy dose of awe. We need to change our approach entirely. Instead of trying to study them like specimens, we need to learn from them. Because right now, humanity isn't just surviving our experiments. They're unconsciously using them to accelerate their own evolution. As if to emphasize her point, the station's systems chose that moment to perform an unscheduled but critically necessary backup of all their research data, just seconds before a random power fluctuation would have corrupted their primary databases. Dr. Vanx looked at the backup confirmation with a knowing smile. You see, even now, just by studying them, we're beginning to attract their kind of luck. The question isn't whether humanity will change the galaxy. They already are. The real question is, are we wise enough to learn from them instead of trying to control them? In the silence that followed, they all watched the holographic display showing hundreds of human colonies across the galaxy, each one a bright point of light representing a tear in the fabric of probability itself. And around each point, reality continued to bend, reshape, and evolve in ways that no equation could predict. The experiment was over, but something far more interesting was just beginning. Sarah Chen, chief administrator of the New Eden colony, stared at the data packet on her quantum tablet with a mixture of amusement and indignation. After 3 sleepless nights of decoding the encrypted files that had accidentally found their way into their colony's communication systems, she finally understood why their settlement had experienced so many convenient coincidences lately. So, she addressed the cramped meeting room filled with colony leaders. It turns out we've been lab rats in a galactic experiment. Those agricultural miracles, mineral discoveries, and mysterious technological breakthroughs, all carefully orchestrated tests by the Galactic Council. Instead of the outrage she expected, the room erupted in laughter. Dr. James Rodriguez, their head of scientific research, actually wiped tears from his eyes. You mean when our water supply got contaminated and somehow turned into the galaxy's most effective probiotic supplement? That was them trying to make us sick. Apparently. Sarah couldn't help but smile. According to these files, they'd been running experiments on human colonies across the galaxy, trying to understand why we're so. She paused, searching for the right word. Lucky, suggested Maria Santos, their chief engineer. Impossible, Sarah corrected. They call it a probability field. Supposedly, we generate some kind of energy that bends reality around us. The more humans gather together, the stronger the effect. The room fell quiet as the implications sank in. Finally, Tom Chen, no relation, their head of security, spoke up. So what do we do about it? File a formal complaint. Start a war. Sarah's smile turned mischievous. I have a better idea. They want to study how humans deal with problems. Let's show them. Over the next few months, the human response to being unwitting test subjects unfolded in a way that only humans could manage. Through carefully orchestrated chaos. It started small. Every time the Council's observation satellites passed over New Eden, their sensors would inexplicably record nothing but old episodes of Earth sitcoms. Their automated probes would find themselves redirected to help with community projects. One particularly sophisticated monitoring device ended up serving as the colony's main pizza oven. But that was just the beginning. News spread through the human colonies via what the Council had dubbed improbably secure channels. Soon, every human settlement in the galaxy was participating in what became known as Operation Probability Storm. On Titan Base, colonists organized weekly lucky dance parties directly under Council observation posts. Somehow, these gatherings always coincided with localized gravity fluctuations that turned the serious scientific instruments into impromptu disco balls. The Mars Collective reprogrammed their atmospheric processors to spell out, "We know you're watching in cloud formations, but only visible in wavelengths the Council's instruments used for covered observation." The Alpha Centauri Mining Corporation discovered that their probability field could be focused through synchronized group activities. They began holding daily meditation sessions where thousands of miners would concentrate on wanting their equipment to work better. The result? Their machinery started operating at 200% efficiency, defying several laws of physics in the process. Dr. Vanks watched these developments with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing alarm. In her private laboratory aboard Station Theta 9, she reviewed the latest reports. They're not just aware of the field now, she explained to a concerned Council delegation. They're learning to direct it. Look at these readings. She displayed a chart showing probability distortions across human space. The effect is growing exponentially, but not in a way that suggests aggression. They're turning our experiments into entertainment. Indeed, human colonies had begun holding competitions to see who could generate the most improbable events. New Eden currently held the record after their entire settlement temporarily hovered 3 meters off the ground during their annual festival, a feat they claimed was achieved by everyone jumping at exactly the right moment. But the most disturbing development, from the Council's perspective, was how the humans had turned their probability field into a form of peaceful protest. Every time the Council tried to implement new monitoring systems, they would face an overwhelming wave of what humans called Murphy's Law Squared. Equipment would malfunction in increasingly impossible ways. Data would transmit perfectly, but arrive as collections of human cookie recipes. Observation posts would find their serious scientific instruments replaced with party supplies, with no evidence of how the switch occurred. The rebellion reached its peak when every Council monitoring station simultaneously experienced what became known as the Tuesday Incident. At exactly 3:14 p.m. Galactic Standard Time, all their systems started playing "Never Gonna Give You Up" by Rick Astley. The song file couldn't be deleted, couldn't be overwritten, and somehow taught the AI to dance. In her latest report to the Council, Dr. Vanks wrote, "We must accept that our attempt to study humanity in secret has not only failed, but has inadvertently taught them to consciously manipulate probability itself. They've turned our scientific study into a galaxy-wide improvisation exercise in impossible physics." She added a personal note. "Most concerning is not that they can do these things, but that they're clearly having fun doing them. A species that can weaponize coincidence and chooses to use it for elaborate pranks is either the most benign or most terrifying force in the galaxy. Possibly both." The Council chambers were in session, discussing this unprecedented situation, when every member's universal translator simultaneously began converting all speeches into human comedy routines. That was when they finally got the message. You can't control chaos. You can't predict the unpredictable. And you certainly can't secretly experiment on a species that treats improbability as their personal playground. As Sarah Chen later explained to a council delegation that came to formally apologize, you tried to study why humans are impossible to predict or control. Did it never occur to you that maybe we're like this precisely because we don't try to predict or control everything? We adapt, we improvise, we laugh at the impossible, and somehow that makes the impossible possible. She grinned as she watched their universal translators struggle to convey concepts like going with the flow and winging it to the bewildered aliens. Besides, she added, your experiments helped us discover something amazing about ourselves. We don't just survive the impossible, we make the impossible normal. And now that we know about it, just imagine what we can do together. The delegation left New Eden that day with a lot to think about, and a strange new appreciation for human chaos. They also found their ship's computers had been programmed to play the final countdown every time they entered hyperspace. Somehow, no one had the heart to change it back. Dr. Vanks stood in the ancient chamber of the precursor archive, her scales shifting through colors of absolute awe. Around her, the crystalline walls pulsed with information stored by a civilization that had vanished millions of years before any current species achieved spaceflight. The discovery itself had been improbable. A human mining operation had accidentally drilled into exactly the right spot on an otherwise unremarkable planet. "Play the recording again," she requested, her voice barely a whisper. The chamber hummed to life, and the holographic image of a precursor scientist materialized. The being's crystalline form sparkled as it spoke in its long-dead language, now translated by the archive systems. "We have found them. The probability engines we theorized. They exist, not as machines or devices, but as living beings. Our calculations suggest they will evolve on a planet called Earth in approximately 2.3 million years. They will appear simple at first, but they are anything but. They are organic probability manipulators, each one a living quantum computer that unconsciously reshapes reality around them. We call them humans." The recording continued, and Dr. Vanks watched with new understanding. The precursors hadn't just predicted humanity's evolution. They had discovered why humans were so unique in the galaxy. In the observation chamber above, the Joint Human Council research team watched the same revelation unfold. Sarah Chen, now serving as humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, broke the stunned silence. "So we're not breaking probability," she said slowly. "We're fixing it. The universe naturally tends toward entropy and disorder, but we push back." Dr. Rodriguez, who had joined the research team after the rebellion, nodded excitedly. "It explains everything. Why we survive when we shouldn't, why we thrive in crisis, why we seem to generate luck around us. We're unconsciously maintaining order in the chaos, like cosmic immune cells." The precursor recording continued its explanation. "These beings will not understand their true nature for some time. They will see their ability to manipulate probability as luck or coincidence, but they are so much more. Each human brain functions as a quantum probability engine, constantly calculating and adjusting countless variables to maintain a balance in reality itself." Kex now, who had transitioned from running experiments on humans to working with them, manipulated the holographic display to show the latest probability field measurements. "Look at this pattern. When humans work together, their individual fields don't just add up. They multiply. They create zones of enhanced probability where the normal rules of entropy are negotiated." "Negotiated?" Sarah laughed. "That's a very diplomatic way of saying we argue with physics and win." But Dr. Vanks's scales had shifted to a pattern indicating deep concern. "There's more," she said, advancing the recording. "The precursors found something else, something that explains why this ability evolved in the first place." The ancient scientist's image flickered as it delivered its final revelation. "The universe is not stable. Reality itself requires constant adjustment and maintenance. Without beings capable of manipulating probability fields, entropy would eventually tear apart the fabric of spacetime. The humans are not an accident. They are necessary. They are the universe's maintenance system. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. It wasn't just that humans were lucky or resilient. They were essential to the very stability of reality. "Well," Sarah said after a long moment, "that explains the compulsive need to fix things we don't understand and stick our noses where they don't belong. Apparently, it's literally our job." Dr. Rodriguez was already running new calculations. "This changes everything we thought we knew about human expansion through the galaxy. We're not just exploring. We're unconsciously going where we're needed most, stabilizing regions of space that are becoming too chaotic. And the effect on other species." Kexnell added, "The way our probability field seems to infect those around us, we're not contaminating them. We're teaching their biology how to help maintain reality too." Dr. Vanx's scales had settled into a pattern of deep contemplation. The precursors knew they wouldn't survive to see humanity's emergence, but they left us this knowledge for a reason. They understood that once humans became aware of their true nature, we could do it consciously. Sarah finished. "Instead of just accidentally fixing probability, we could actually work at it, direct it, use it purposefully." The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just another spacefaring species. They were reality's maintenance crew. Evolutionary janitors keeping the universe running smoothly without even knowing it. And now that they knew, we need to tell everyone. Sarah decided, not just the council or the colonies. Every human needs to understand what they are, what they can do, not to make us feel special, but because the universe literally needs us to know. Dr. Vanx's scales shifted to a color she had never displayed before, a deep, resonant gold that seemed to pulse with its own light. "The precursors left one final message," she said, activating the last portion of the recording. The ancient scientist's image smiled, or at least made a crystalline expression that the translator interpreted as a smile. "To those who find this message, the humans will seem chaotic, unpredictable, even impossible. But they are exactly what they need to be. They are the universe's way of keeping itself alive. Help them understand their nature. Help them grow into their purpose. Because without them, without their ability to bend probability itself, reality would eventually fade into pure entropy. They are not just survivors. They are survival itself." As the recording faded, Sarah looked around at her fellow humans and their alien colleagues. "No pressure, right?" she joked. "We're just responsible for maintaining the fundamental stability of the universe." Dr. Rodriguez was already taking notes. "We need to start testing conscious probability manipulation, if we can direct this ability instead of just letting it happen randomly." "First," Dr. Vanx interrupted, her scales now showing a pattern of amused affection she had learned from working with humans, "I suggest we deal with the fact that every piece of recording equipment in this chamber has somehow transformed into coffee makers. Old habits die hard, it seems." Sarah looked around at the inexplicably appeared coffee machines and laughed. "Hey, if we're going to be the universe's maintenance crew, we're going to need caffeine. Even our probability field knows that." And somewhere, in the quantum fabric of reality itself, the universe hummed in satisfied agreement. Its maintenance crew was finally beginning to understand their job. Now the real work could begin. 10 years after the discovery in the precursor archive, the Galactic Assembly Hall looked very different from its traditionally austere design. Probability-reinforced quantum crystals pulsed with soft light, their structure maintained by a combination of advanced alien technology and human-generated probability fields. Around the circular chamber, representatives from every spacefaring species sat alongside their human partners, engaged in what had become known as probability engineering. Admiral Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's chief probability engineer, stood at the central podium. Behind her, a holographic display showed the successful stabilization of a dying star system, a joint operation between human probability manipulators and alien scientists. 5 years ago, the Proxima Centauri collapse would have been a catastrophe, she began. Today, thanks to our partnership with the Quantum Mind Collective and the Crystalline Federation, we've not only prevented the collapse but established a new method of stellar reconstruction. Dr. Vance, her scales now permanently displaying patterns unknown in her species before working with humans, added, the combination of human probability manipulation and our advanced physics has opened possibilities we never imagined. We're not just preserving reality, we're helping it evolve. The chamber hummed with approval. The past decade had transformed galactic civilization. Once humans understood their role as cosmic maintenance workers, they'd approached it with characteristic enthusiasm and creativity. Every human colony now had a probability engineering division, working alongside alien scientists to identify and stabilize regions of space-time instability. But it went beyond mere maintenance. Kexnel, now heading the Joint Species Probability Research Institute, stepped forward to present the latest findings. Our understanding of human probability fields has evolved significantly, he explained, manipulating the holographic display to show new data. We've discovered that humans don't just generate probability fields. They can shape them, direct them, even teach other species how to interact with them. The display showed footage from the new Probability Engineering Academy on Mars, where humans and aliens worked together to develop what they called conscious quantum manipulation. Young humans learned to focus their natural probability bending abilities, while alien students studied how to resonate with and amplify these effects. The most remarkable discovery, Kexnel continued, is how the human probability field responds to cooperation. When humans work together with other species, the effect doesn't just grow stronger. It becomes more refined, more precise. We're not just fixing reality anymore. We're helping it thrive. Dr. Rodriguez, now ancient but still enthusiastic as ever, activated his own presentation. Look at these readings from the Deep Space Probability Network. Every joint human-alien colony, every mixed species crew, every collaborative project creates what we're calling probability anchors, stable points in spacetime that actually strengthen the fabric of reality around them. The evidence was undeniable. Regions of space where humans and aliens worked together showed markedly increased stability. Even in areas prone to natural disasters or cosmic anomalies, these probability anchors maintained pockets of enhanced order and possibility. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The fear and suspicion that had once surrounded humanity's impossible nature had transformed into appreciation and partnership. Alien civilizations no longer saw humans as chaotic elements to be controlled or studied. They were essential colleagues in the ongoing project of universal maintenance. We've come a long way from trying to figure out why humans couldn't be assassinated, Sarah joked, earning chuckles from around the chamber. But in a way, that was our first clue. We weren't just surviving against probability. We were unconsciously maintaining it. Dr. Vanx's scales shifted to display a newly evolved pattern that somehow conveyed both scientific precision and human-like warmth. The precursors knew humanity would be essential to the universe's survival. What they couldn't have predicted was how humanity would transform that role through partnership and cooperation. She highlighted a particular set of data, the exponential growth in stability across charted space since the implementation of joint probability engineering projects. We thought humans were a problem to be solved. Instead, they were the solution to problems we didn't even know we had. The assembly's attention turned to the latest joint project displayed on the massive screens, the first intentionally created probability anchor, a space station designed to amplify and direct human probability fields through alien technology. The station, named Murphy's Law, humans insisted on maintaining their sense of humor, would serve as a hub for probability engineering across an entire sector of space. But the real breakthrough, Sarah continued, isn't in our technology, or even in our understanding of probability fields. It's in what we've learned about cooperation itself. Every species brings something unique to this project. Humans may generate probability fields, but it's the combined knowledge and abilities of all our peoples that lets us use them effectively. She gestured to the gathered assembly. Humans and aliens working together in ways that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. We're not just maintaining reality anymore. We're growing it, improving it, helping it evolve. And we're doing it together. The chamber erupted in approval, and if the gravity seemed to fluctuate slightly, making everyone feel momentarily lighter, well, that was just probability working in their favor. As the session concluded, Dr. Vanks approached Sarah with a data crystal. The latest readings from the Deep Space Network, she explained, her scales shifting through patterns of excitement. We're detecting new probability anchors forming spontaneously in regions where humans and aliens are working together. The effect is becoming self-sustaining. Sarah smiled, remembering the long journey from being considered a galactic problem to becoming part of a universal solution. You know what this means, don't you? Reality isn't just accepting our maintenance, it's starting to anticipate it. The universe is learning to work with us, just as we've learned to work with each other. Dr. Vanks's scales displayed a pattern that somehow combined scientific satisfaction with what could only be described as joy. Perhaps that was the real purpose all along. Not just to maintain reality, but to help it grow. To show that when different species work together, even the impossible becomes probable. As if to emphasize her point, the probability fields around them pulsed gently, and for a moment, everyone in the chamber could see the quantum strings of reality itself, glowing with possibility and potential. The universe, it seemed, approved of this partnership, and somewhere, in archives that would be discovered far in the future, a final message from the precursors waited to be found. We predicted they would maintain reality. We hoped they would understand their role. But they have exceeded every expectation by doing something we never imagined. They taught the universe itself how to evolve through cooperation and unity. The humans were never the problem. They were always the answer.